Um, well, we're in Luke chapter 23, and because of the way all this landed, today we are reflecting on the death of Jesus. I know it's Palm Sunday, but as the text's laid out to land on Easter on the resurrection passage, today we're handling the death of Jesus. At Good Friday, we'll talk about the burial of Jesus, and then next Sunday, the resurrection of Jesus. And as we begin to launch in today's sermon, I recall a few years ago, I got that notice in the mail, that notice that you have to show up for jury duty. You know, that notice that everyone loves. And so I did my best to get out of it, but couldn't. So I went to the courthouse and sat through the jury selection process. Now, what I discovered at that moment was the jury selection process turns even an atheist into a person of prayer. Oh God, please don't let them pick me. Please don't let them pick me. We were all praying. But, you know, I got selected, of course. God laughed at me and he said, no, you will, sir. So I got the joy of doing that and listening to opening arguments from the counsels there. And here's one thing that was stressed over and over to me. The counsels for both the prosecution and the defense said this: you are going to hear in this trial the voices of many witnesses. In fact, we had 2.5 days. Listen carefully to what they have to say. Listen to what they have to say. Don't drift off. Stay engaged. What they have to say is important. And I think today in this passage, Luke, the author of the Gospel of Luke, is imploring you in the same way. He's going to say, I have 6 different voices that I am going to tell you about. These voices surround the cross. Look at them. Listen to them. Don't drift off. Don't miss this, because what these 6 voices have to say is important. We've been in the Gospel of Luke, for a very, very long time. We have taken breaks, but it's been over 1.5 years that we've been in this Gospel, and we're nearing the end. The Gospel of Luke is told in 4 movements. They're all geographic. The journey from heaven to earth, the journey in Galilee, the journey to Jerusalem, and now the journey to fulfillment. And we've been just working through this passage where Jesus is headed towards the cross, and Luke wants you to know this. That's why we call this series Life on Purpose. Luke wants you to know that Jesus didn't end up here on the cross on accident. It is fulfillment of what God the Father intended for God the Son to save humanity. And so today in this text, Jesus has been on trial. Jordan and Jeff last week did a great job of handling the trial of Jesus, and Jeff handled the sentencing last week. And today, Jesus is executed in our text. He's taken to the death chamber. He's taken to their place of execution, to Golgotha. He is hung on a cross and he dies. And my question for you today, and I think that Luke is trying to answer as he's listening to the testimony of the witnesses of everyone who is watching, 6 different voices around the cross. Why did this innocent man die? Jeff was very clear last week as he looked at the text. Pilate declared Jesus innocent and then sentenced him anyway. Why did Jesus go along with this? Why did this innocent man die? And so let's gather at the foot of the cross and listen to what these voices surrounding the cross. If you imagine the cross of Jesus and all these people in a circle around it, Luke is going to zoom in on different voices and see what they have to say about why they think Jesus died. Let's look at these today and listen closely. And to do that, really to extend this invitation, I want to really start in the very last verse of the passage, verse 49. It says, after Jesus died, Luke says, all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things. This word acquaintances, it's not very often that I run into the English Standard Version, a translation I don't like, but I don't like the word acquaintances here. Because this word in the original language has to do with knowledge. These were not the 12 disciples of Jesus, but these were people, part of the hundreds of other people that had been surrounding Jesus and following him and would say, I am a follower of Jesus. These were more than acquaintances. And they stood at a distance watching the testimony of these voices. And Luke is inviting you and I to do the same thing. So why did an innocent man die? What did the eyewitnesses, what did the voices around the cross say? 6 things for you today. It's a 6-point sermon, so, maybe an intermission, or I'll have you home by dinner tonight, okay? I will try to make this through this in a timely fashion. The first thing that the eyewitnesses, the first witness that we're going to hear, the first voice, is the voice of lament. We did a whole series on lament. But here we have some women at the cross following Jesus, lamenting what is happening to him. Now, first we run into Simon of Cyrene. Why was this guy included? Why did Luke include this bit about Simon being forced to carry the cross of Jesus? Jesus by this time had been beaten so badly he no longer had the strength to carry his own cross on the way to execution. And so the Roman soldiers just grabbed someone. Why does Luke include this? Well, all the gospel writers include the bit about Simon, and I think that's because Simon was probably well known in the church. And so this deal. But the other thing that Luke is saying, it's not just a believer or a follower or a person named Simon. It's Simon of Cyrene. Why is Cyrene important? Because Luke is telling us that the voices that are watching this and observing this are from all over the world. Cyrene is located in modern-day Libya. It is 1,700 miles from Jerusalem. This man came a long ways for Passover. I mean, that's not, listen, that's a drive to Florida except by camel. I mean, it's a long ways. Luke wants you to know that there are voices from all over the world watching this event. Listen to them. The first voice is these women, the voice of lament. These women are mourning. They're following behind Jesus. Now, in some circles, after someone died, you could hire professional wailers to wail. But I don't think that's what's happening here, because Jesus has a lot of compassion on these women. These women are saying, listen, this death of Jesus is a tragic injustice. They are lamenting Jesus' death as if he didn't have a choice in the matter. That's their perspective. Jesus, it appears, he was declared innocent. Now he's being forced to his execution. And of course, the irony here is, while the death of Jesus is a tragic injustice, but Jesus submitted to it. Like, this isn't a mistake. These women are like, this is a colossal mistake. We're mourning a mistake. Jesus is saying, this isn't a mistake. I mean, it's like these women are treating this like, if you see a story on the news of someone who was just randomly beat up and robbed, you would say, wow, that's really sad that random thing happened to that person. There's nothing random about the death of Jesus. And Jesus' response then is one of compassion. He's saying, hey, listen, just for a moment, don't weep for me. Weep for yourself. Well, wait a minute. If I'm a woman there following Jesus, why would I weep for myself? Jesus, you're the one going to die. And Jesus is saying, oh no. I know, because I'm a prophet of God, I know what's going to happen. In just a span of about 35 or more years, Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. The Romans are going to come in 70 AD, and they will ransack and destroy the city. And it will be so bad. It will be so bad that normally a woman has a baby and everyone says, you are blessed. But it'll say, no, actually that's a curse. It would be better if you didn't have a child. In fact, the people will be crying out, we would like to die. Let the mountain come down on us, crush us, kill us, because that's better than what we are going through now. Jesus says, in compassion, weep for yourself. Don't weep for me, because this is happening to me on purpose. And then he says this little bit about it, verse 31, for if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it's dry? So I think what Jesus is saying here is this. If this kind of judgment came down on me, someone who's innocent, the green wood, imagine what would happen if it comes on you, those in this city who are killing me, who are guilty. Like if they're burning the green wood, wait till the dry stuff goes up. When the derecho hit last summer, Clarissa and I were living in a trailer, and that was fun. I was actually here at church while my wife and kids were hiding in the trailer. That's just nice of me that way. They ran, we were fine, but at our house that we were building at the time, we had this big tree in the back, and this giant branch fell. It cracked and fell to the and just kind of hanging there in the ground. But we were in the process of building a house, and they just had too much to do to deal with that. So I just left it there for like 2 months. It just sat back there. Finally, we decided, you know what? We need to do something with that. So we put it in a pile, and we decided to burn it. I had been burning a lot of green stuff in my life. I'm not a good fire starter. I have a hard time starting a fire. I usually resort to gasoline or something stupid like that. But, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be hard. I'm just telling you, I lit one of those leaves, and this whole thing goes whoosh into this giant fireball. And now I'm running to get the hose, because I'm like, the last thing I want to do is the fire department get called and Nathan shows up, right? And I'm completely embarrassed by this. And so I'm running around the sides trying to make sure it was fine. Nothing burned down. Have you ever burned something really dry? It goes like that. And here's Jesus saying, if they're bringing down the house on me, who's innocent, what's going to happen in judgment when those who are really guilty judged? The voice of lament, Jesus corrects them. They think he died by accident, and Jesus is saying, no. This is happening to me. I'm submitting to this. But what will happen to you will be far worse. The voice of lament. The second voice that we hear around the cross is the voice of ignorance. The voice of ignorance. Why did this man die? Well, the voice of ignorance says Jesus was crucified because he deserved it. I mean, he's an idiot. He thinks he's delusional. He thinks he's the Messiah. He thinks he's king. This is why he died. And Jesus says to the voice of ignorance, he prays for them. That's his response. Now, the text says here, this is where we see that Jesus is crucified. It's a simple verse 33. When they came to the place of the skull, that's in Aramaic, it's Golgotha. You've heard of it. That in Latin, it's Calvaria, where we get Calvary. And so, you've heard these words. It's just the name of the place there. They come, and they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. The most monumental moment of this point in history till now, the most monumental moment when God is crucified, gets a verse. And they crucified him. Why do we get no details about this? Well, you have to understand, in Luke's world, everybody knew what crucifixion meant. Crucifixions happened all the time. The Romans loved to kill people this way, to flex their muscle and say, hey, don't mess with us, Rome, because we will torment you and we will kill you. Don't mess with us. Everybody, they were commonplace. People saw people tortured and suffering this way, sometimes for days. Everybody in the Roman Empire knew what a crucifixion was. It's like if I was writing and I went to a basketball game. I probably wouldn't need to explain to you how a basketball game works, would I? Even if you're not a sports person, you at the very least know a ball is dribbled and it goes through a hoop. You know the basics of basketball. It's like that. Why would I go into detail? Because everybody knows what crucifixion means. There are two voices at the foot of the cross that speak in ignorance here. The first one is the voice of the Jewish rulers. They scoff at him. And they say, he saved others. Let him save himself. If he is the Christ, the Messiah, the chosen one. They think he's not. Like, clearly, if you were the Messiah, you wouldn't be hanging on a cross. You idiot. And the soldiers jump in because they're Roman and they think this is the king of the Jews. Look, you idiot. You stupid Jews, they would say. You think you got your own king? Look what we do to your king. Everybody is scoffing Jesus. What does Jesus do? He prays. He says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. They are ignorant. Forgive them. In Luke 6:28, Jesus said, love your enemies. Pray for those who abuse you. I mean, Jesus foreshadowed, I think, in Luke 6, because he knew what was going to happen to him. And he puts his teaching into practice. For those that are abusing him, the standard practice of someone dying on a cross would be to unleash all the obscenities. If you're going to hang me on a cross for all to see, I'm going to set the record straight. I'm going to unleash obscenities on everybody and curse them. Jesus doesn't do that. He prays for those who are abusing him. Jesus asked that they be forgiven because they are mocking what they don't understand. They're ignorant. Of course, the irony is they're mocking Jesus because he's the king, but he actually is the king. For the Roman soldiers, they thought Caesar, their king, was the biggest, baddest, bestest ever. And the irony, of course, is Jesus is the King of Kings. For the Jews, the Jewish leaders that are mocking him, Jesus asks that they be forgiven. And in this moment, the irony is that they say he can't save himself. He chooses not to save himself so that he can save the whole world. Jesus was actually the king. Jesus was actually the Messiah. An innocent man died to save the ignorant ones who killed him. We got the voice of the women lamenting. We got the voice of the leaders mocking and the soldiers mocking, and now mocking in ignorance. And now the third voice we have is the voice of guilt. These are two criminals hanging next to Jesus. They're likely insurrectionists. They had led Jewish people that had led some kind of revolt against Rome, and they're being killed for it. Rome had no patience for this kind of thing. They were going to put it down. So the first criminal joins those who were scoffing. He just kind of joins in scoffing and mocking Jesus. But Luke zeroes in on the second criminal. And the second criminal says, hey, Jesus isn't guilty. I'm the guilty one. There is no way in this moment that this man here, this man who says, this man has done nothing wrong, remember me when you come into your kingdom. There is no way this man can fully understand who Jesus is with the information he has. But here's what he does know. He knows that Jesus is truly a king. Because he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. He knows that somehow, maybe it's in heaven, Jesus will be reigning. Somehow and he knows Jesus is dying. Somehow, Jesus, after you die, I believe you're going to be reigning as king somewhere in some way. When that happens, I'm dying too. Remember me. He knows that he does not deserve to be part of the kingdom of God. He's a criminal. He has done vile and horrible things. But he asks for mercy anyway. And he believes that this King of Heaven, Jesus, will save him to a kingdom. And what I love is Jesus' response. Jesus' response is, your belief has saved you. Today, you'll be with me in paradise. What happened on the cross is a miracle. An innocent man died in the place of a guilty one. And you and I are supposed to read Luke, and you are supposed to identify with the criminal on the cross. Either you will be the one criminal who says, whatever, Jesus, or you will be the other criminal who says, I too am a criminal. And what happened on the cross is that Jesus took the punishment that criminal was due, the eternal punishment. And so in doing this, that man could be with Jesus in eternity. And so the invitation to you and me is the same, is that it's this simple idea that I am guilty. If you haven't stopped and said, I am guilty, you cannot be a Christian. If you have not acknowledged your own guilt, I too am the criminal. Jesus takes the debt this criminal couldn't pay, and he gives an eternal reward. The irony, of course, of all these voices around the cross, it takes a criminal to recognize the innocent one. An innocent man died to save all of us guilty ones. The fourth voice we see here today is the voice of creation. This is, I think, one of the most interesting parts of this crucifixion narrative in Luke, is that not only are the women speaking and the rulers and soldiers speaking and the criminals speaking, but now all creation speaks and gives its testimony. It's one of the most interesting aspects of creation. We see this in verse 44. It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed. The darkness grew so deep that you could not see the sun. The light of the sun had no effect. I've seen some pretty cloudy days, but not like this. Creation is coming undone. Creation is coming unglued at this tragic injustice that's happening to its creator. There's a second aspect of creation, though, because God created, of course, in Genesis 1, the entire world. He created the light. But now, also, later in Exodus, we see God created the tabernacle or the temple. It's this other aspect of God's creation. And this is absolutely fascinating because in the temple there's this curtain, and the curtain divides the most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant was, and just people couldn't go in there. Only the high priest once a year could go into this place. And the idea was to keep God and the people separate. Because in Exodus we saw the people crying out, Moses, you go talk to God for us because we're scared of what will happen to us. In Isaiah, when Isaiah has a vision of God and he goes into God's presence, what does he say? Woe is me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips. Like, he gets it. There is a terror to being in the actual presence of God. When the veil is torn, you've probably heard it said that one of the cool aspects of this, and the writer of Hebrews tells us this and reminds us of this, is that when the veil is torn, it opened up the holy place so that believers in Christ could go right in and access God. But one of the things that maybe you haven't paid attention to before, and it struck me as I was reading this, the other purpose of the veil, the big curtain, was to keep God out. It was to protect people from the holiness and from the justice of God. And when the veil is torn, when creation comes undone, the voice of creation, God's presence and his justice and the punishment that is due all mankind comes rushing out of the temple. And where does it land? Square on the shoulders of the man on the cross. The voice of creation is screaming out. The heavens and the temple cry out, Jesus is innocent, but he takes the judgment. The people that God created didn't recognize the innocence of Jesus, but the creation of God did. Jesus' response to all this, of course, is that I submit to the Father of all creation. And he says here, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. I mean, he's suffering, and he's still submitting to the will of the Father. And this is the moment that Jesus died. And having said this, he breathed his last. I think that Luke wants us to just pause here. The moment that God died. On purpose. For you. For me. And creation said that he died to take the judgment of God, the Father, that you deserve and that I deserve. An innocent man died. Why? To take the judgment that we deserved. There's two more voices around the cross. So we have clearly here the women of lament that misunderstand, the voice of ignorance that misunderstands. We have the criminal who actually gets it, the voice of the guilty, with the voice of all creation declaring his innocence. And then the fifth voice is the voice of Rome. Verse 47, the Roman centurion says, "Certainly this man was innocent." Again, all the gospel writers talk about this centurion. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all talk about this centurion. And Matthew and Mark have the centurion saying something a little different. The centurion says in there, surely this man was the Son of God. But Luke says, the centurion said, surely this man was innocent. Now, I don't think one was wrong. The centurion probably said a lot of things, right? He probably said both these things. Or he certainly implied by saying that he was the Son of God that he was innocent. Luke has a point. And Luke's point is very clear here. That this man did not deserve to die. That this man was declared innocent. And yet he died anyway. And he did it on purpose. And for Rome, when a Gentile, who is probably the primary audience for Luke, would read this text, they would go, wow, the voice of a Roman soldier matters. This is a trustworthy voice. And what does he say? Jesus was innocent. The irony here is it took a Gentile to recognize the innocence of the Jewish God incarnate. There's a sixth voice then. The last voice here is the voice of regret. The voice of regret, verse 48. And all the crowds, they've been following this spectacle for weeks for us now. All the crowds that had assembled for the spectacle, when they saw what had happened, what had taken place, they returned home beating their breasts. That is a symbol of regret and remorse. The crowd that wanted him dead now regretted what they had done. The crowd got what they wanted, and now they wish they didn't have it. You ever wanted something and then wish you didn't have it? Luke is saying Jesus is innocent, and they're recognizing it. People are seeing it. Why did an innocent man die? What did these eyewitnesses say? Well, you see them all up here. They all have voices. But the main point of Luke, don't miss this, is that Jesus died on purpose. He was innocent. He could take the guilt of everyone, and he was submitting perfectly to the will of the Father. There was a plan and a purpose, and Jesus is right involved and engaged and willingly doing it. The plan was for an innocent man to save all the guilty ones. All this boils down to these two things. If you're going to take something away, I want you to think about two things. First of all, there is a cry here on Luke's part for you to just simply trust in Jesus. Luke shows all these people, all their voices, all their thoughts to show you that whatever you think about Jesus, it's not something new. You didn't come up with this new voice or new perspective. Whatever you think about Jesus, whatever you think, someone else has thought it, but ultimately all of these voices, he wants you to be like the criminal. Of all these people, you should be the criminal who says, I am guilty. Forgive me. There's a cry here for you. You don't even have to understand it all perfectly. You just have to believe and trust in him. There's a call for that. But then there's a second application. Trust in Jesus, number one. Number two, live like Jesus died. Trust him and then live like he died. This is fascinating because the death of Jesus is a call to us to live like he died. First, how does he die? The very first thing he does is he has compassion on the lamenting to these women. There are many, many hurting people in this world, and you know the old phrase, hurt people hurt. Hurting people hurt. And that happens. Jesus has compassion on those who misunderstand, who are hurting for the wrong reasons. And he has a great compassion on them. There are many hurting people in this world. Usually, the pain of the hurting is their own fault. You can boil this down. No matter who the most hurting person is in their life, you could probably boil it down to, it's kind of your own fault. You did something. It happens often, all the time. Jesus doesn't just look at these women and go, yeah, this is your fault. You're getting what you deserve. He has compassion on them. It's like the alcoholic, right? Who he ruined his marriage. And you could just go, well, it's kind of your own fault. Stop drinking. There's compassion there. There is a time and a place for compassion. And Jesus has it. And you and I should be the kinds of people that live with compassion towards others. We live like Jesus died. The second thing I thought about living like Jesus died is Jesus' prayer for the ignorant. One, we have compassion on people, but we also have this moment where Jesus prays and acknowledges the ignorance of people. Praying for your enemies is hard. People are culpable of so many things in our life, but oftentimes the most grievous sins that are committed against us involve some type of ignorance. Often it's an ignorance about who Jesus is. But you can pray for those who hurt you by acknowledging at some level there's just an ignorance. And you too can pray, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Even your employer that has hurt you so badly, or your ex-spouse that has really hurt you, or that relative or the friend or the neighbor or coworker, or that somebody who has hurt you so deeply, at some level recognizing the ignorance and praying for them. That's difficult. Praying for your enemies is hard, but we're called to live like Jesus died. The third thing I was thinking about in these voices is the forgiveness to the sinner. Jesus forgives this criminal. And so we're called to forgive those who have hurt us. Whose debt are you holding? Jesus was literally the Son of God. He was holding this criminal's debt to God. Whose debt do you hold? Somebody owes you something, whether it be fiscally or otherwise. Whose debt do you hold? Who has wronged you? What is it that you can not release? If you live like Jesus died, it means forgiving the guilty, releasing it. And then the other thing that Jesus did as he was dying is he submitted to the will of the Father. If we're going to live like Jesus died, we have to submit. Are you content allowing your life to be in the hands of the Father? Because your life probably did not turn out according to your plan. I don't know, this is a small thing and it's a dumb thing. When I broke my ankle and I was laying there on the ground in the street and the bone was pointing the wrong way and it was gross. And I went to the hospital and the foot doctor that was on call there did a great job. He put it back in place and told me I was going to need surgery, and I said, what are the implications of having a metal plate in my foot with, turned out to be 9 screws, and, I'm thinking, am I going to have to, at the airport, get, wanded every single time or whatnot? And he says, well, I'm going to be honest with you. Your ankle will probably never be the same. That's just you're like, Dave, that's a dumb thing. But I don't know. In that moment, I was like, wait a minute. I can't go back to being 25 again. I know some of you also are 25, and you're like, I don't understand that. Okay, you will, trust me. And there was this moment where it was just like, okay, God, well, someday I'll get a new body. Can't wait. That'll be awesome. I won't have a metal plate in my ankle anymore. But okay. This, whatever you have for me, I'll take. I think we live like Jesus died when we just say, God, whatever you have in front of me, I will take it. And I will joyfully live as a follower of Jesus, no matter what it is. No matter what happens, Lord, into your hands I commit my spirit. The voices of the cross scream out for contemplation on your part and my part. And Jesus shed his blood for us, and Jesus gave his life for you. So you should live like Jesus died, and you should trust him over and over again. 6 voices around the cross. I have a 7th one to add. It's many years later. I was reading about the biography of a man named William Cowper. William Cowper wrote a lot of hymns. He lived in the mid to late 1700s in Puritan England. He grew up with kind of as many churchy people did, an understanding of religious things and God. But William Cowper suffered from debilitating, paralyzing depression. He had a terrible, horrible childhood and upbringing, and that factored into it. At one point, he fell madly in love with his cousin and knew that that was forbidden and he couldn't do that, and it messed with him. And in many places, many times in his life, the darkness got so deep that he tried to take his own life. We have recorded 4 attempts on his own life. After each time he would attempt this and was unsuccessful, he would go into a deeper depression because now he knew he had committed a deep sin. He believed murder was wrong and self-murder was a deep, deep sin, and he believed that now he had sort of committed this sin that even though it wasn't successful, that he could never be forgiven for. But after his 3rd attempt in 1764, he was sitting reading the Gospel of John. He was reading about the account of Lazarus being raised from the dead, and he was sitting there, and for the first time in reading this, he understood the grace and forgiveness of the God of the cross. He writes this: "Immediately I received the strength to believe it, and the full beams of the Sun of Righteousness shone upon me. I saw the sufficiency of the atonement he had made, my pardon sealed in his blood. Unless the almighty arm had been under me, I think I should have died with gratitude and joy. My eyes filled with tears, my voice choked with transport. I could only look up to heaven in silent fear, overwhelmed with love and wonder." You see, William Cowper understood what it was like to be a criminal on the cross when he looked at Jesus. And he saw a king who was innocent, whose blood poured down and covered over his sin. And this is the song he penned. There is a fountain. It's filled with blood. It's drawn from Emmanuel's veins. And sinners plunged beneath that flood. They lose all their guilty stains. Our worship team is going to come and we're going to sing that song. You may not know it, and that's okay. Just sit. Just stay seated. This is a time for contemplation and reflection on the wonderful gift that Jesus has given us in his death. Heavenly Father, we thank you for Jesus and that we are undeserving. We thank you, Jesus, that you gave yourself for us. Thank you for the blood that cleanses our sins. In Jesus' name, amen.